question. By a show of hands, how many Ohio State fans do we have here? I'll be sure to pray for you all tonight. When Coach Chamberlain came to me and told me that the theme of the service today was victory, I decided the best place to figure that out first would be the dictionary. So the Webster Dictionary defines victory as the overcoming of an enemy or an antagonist and the achievement of mastery or success in a struggle or endeavor against odds or difficulties. I feel like this kind of describes the Christian life to a T. I mean, Jesus went and died on the cross and overcame the enemy of death and Satan. And for the purpose of us to be able to succeed in the struggle of life against all odds, we were all destined for the ultimate punishment of hell. But through Jesus' death and resurrection, we were able to overcome those odds. So then I got to thinking about victory and who typically gets recognized for a victory. And I've played a lot of sports, and it's usually, in football, either the coach or the quarterback. And so I deem those people as like the leaders of the team. And this was really important to me when I was choosing where I wanted to go to school and where I wanted to play. And I asked myself a question at every school. Could I see myself playing for that coach? Did I like where he was leading the team and the direction of the team and the atmosphere and everything? And as soon as I met Coach Chamberlain, I knew that UD was the place for me to be. And just the way that he knew, my parents and what they did, and my brother, how old he was, and what grade he was in school, and he made it very personable, and it felt like a family. And that was something that was very important to me. And so I'd like to thank you for that. But so in general, when I think about victorious leaders, and I think of maybe generals in war, they have won battles like Patton or Eisenhower or George Washington. They've won battles here and there. Or every 4 years we have a politician who wins a battle against his opponent. And then when you go to sports, different quarterbacks. So the two quarterbacks in the Super Bowl this year, you could say they're victorious leaders. Or for me, Tom Brady, because he went to Michigan and won a lot of Super Bowls, a couple Super Bowls. But what makes them victor? Well, why do we consider them to be victorious? Well, they've experienced successes and brief successes, or winning games here and there, or they've obtained a significant amount of wealth. But these are all by worldly standards how they're successful, and their victories last as a mere moment in time. For instance, if we try to think about quarterbacks who won the Super Bowl, who won last year, well, that's pretty fresh in our memories, is Eli Manning. But if we go back 10 years, can anybody remember who the winning quarterback of the Super Bowl was? I do, because they beat my favorite team, the Raiders. It was Brad Johnson. But if we go back even further, when I was born, it was 1990. Does anybody know who won the Super Bowl that year? It was Joe Montana and the 49ers. So, these in the year when it happens, these people are touted as awesome victors and great leaders, but their victories are very brief, and a year or two down the road, nobody really remembers those victories. So I think that it's more important to recognize people who live victorious lives with the end goal in mind. And I think that someone that, as I read the Bible, and somebody that I think lived a victorious life was King David. And that's somebody that I like to read about and try to emulate him and what he did. So today I'd like to talk about how we can live victorious lives, and the 4 points that I think that can lead to a victorious life. And the first one is understanding that God can call anyone to do great things. And if you look in 1 Samuel chapter 16, when the Lord called David, verses 4 through 13, Samuel did what the Lord said. When he arrived at Bethlehem, the elders of the town trembled when they met him. They asked, "Do you come in peace?" Samuel replied, "Yes, in peace. I have come to sacrifice to the Lord. Consecrate yourselves and come to the sacrifice with me." Then he consecrated Jesse and his sons and invited them to the sacrifice. When they arrived, Samuel saw Eliab and thought, "Surely the Lord's anointed stands here before the Lord." But the Lord said to Samuel, "Do not consider his appearance or his height, for I have rejected him. The Lord does not look at the things man looks at. Man looks at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart." Then Jesse called Abinadab and had him pass in front of Samuel. But Samuel said, "The Lord has not chosen this one either." Jesse then had Shammah pass by, but Samuel said, "Nor has the Lord chosen this one." Jesse had 7 of his sons pass before Samuel, but Samuel said to him, "The Lord has not chosen these." So he asked Jesse, "Are these all the sons you have?" "There is the youngest," Jesse answered, "but he is tending the sheep." Samuel said, "Send for him. We will not sit down until he arrives." So he sent and had him brought in. He was ready with a fine appearance and handsome features. Then the Lord said, "Rise and anoint him. He is the one." So Samuel took the horn of oil and anointed him in the presence of his brothers. And from that day on, the Spirit of the Lord came upon David in power. Now, something that stands out to me in this is that God could have called any one of David's brothers, but he chose David for a reason. Samuel, even a man of God, saw the outward appearance as what would be qualities of a leader. What he might call king material, but the Lord looked further than that. 1 Corinthians, we read, "Brothers, think of what you were when you were called. Not many of you were wise by human standards. Not many were influential. Not many were of noble birth. But God chose the foolish things of the world to shame the wise. God chose the weak things of the world to shame the strong. He chose the lowly things of this world and the despised things and the things that are not, to nullify the things that are, so that no one may boast before him." So we see why God chooses who he chooses. He chooses people to be victorious, to bring glory for himself. He could have chosen any one of David's brothers who looked more like a king than David did. David was even forgotten by his own father. He was the left out tending the sheep, and he only brought the other ones. But God had a plan for him, and he chose him. When the Israelites first wanted a king, God gave them somebody who looked the part. They wanted to be like every other nation, and he chose Saul. And we read that Saul was head and shoulders above everyone else, and no one looked like him in all of Israel. So the people noticed that he was a king right away. But when we look at Saul's life, he quickly turned his back on God and lived through his own glory. And we can read a lot of his conversations with Samuel. He references, like, pray to your God. Pray to your God all the time. He doesn't recognize it as his God anymore. So this time, God chooses someone who, instead of maybe who could take success and claim it as his own, he chose someone who could only give glory to God for his success. And throughout the Bible, we can see this in many different cases where God chooses people to be victorious who we would not normally think would be victorious people. For instance, he chooses Moses. Moses came up with every excuse in the book to not go talk to the Pharaoh, but God chose him anyways and used him anyways. Jonah, when God called Jonah, he ran away and didn't want anything to do with it, but God used him anyways. And Rahab was a prostitute. No one would think that God would use a prostitute, but he used her anyways, and all for his glory. Because God sees what man doesn't see. I think that, for me, I find resonance in this story, but because when I was a freshman, I got a job working at Red Pat in the research department there, and I didn't think I was qualified for it. The guy who's my boss now, he emailed me and said, "I want you to come work for me and do research for me and whatnot." And I emailed him back and said, "Do you know I'm a freshman?" Like, I don't know anything. And I couldn't believe it. But I feel like it's kind of the same thing. We say that to God sometimes. Like, do you know? Like, I don't know anything about that. Like, I have no experience in that. Like, why would you choose me? But like my boss said to me, like, "No, I'll teach you what you need to know, and you'll be fine." God says that to us when he chooses us for his calling. Second point would be, we can be victorious by focusing on God rather than the challenges that we face. When we think about life, how many times do we focus on the negative situation that we're facing rather than focusing on the face of God and how he can get us through it? If we go to Scripture, we can see that the Israelites do this all the time when they're wandering through the wilderness. When they first got out of Egypt and they were confronted with the Red Sea, what did they do? They complained to Moses about that the Egyptians were going to capture them, take them back to Egypt, kill them. They didn't see it as an opportunity for God to glorify himself and bring them through that. And they're hungry in the wilderness and thirsty. And they complained to Moses about that he brought them out there to starve, and that they were going to be thirsty, and why didn't he leave them in Egypt where they had food, but they were in bondage? And they didn't see that as a way that God could glorify himself. We see David does this sometimes as well when he's hiding from Saul. He goes to Nob and he lies to the priest there. When I first read it, I thought, okay, cool. He's going to like a city. He's going to like a city of God to hide from Saul for protection. But he lies to get food and he eats the holy bread, and then he lies and he gets a sword. And I think that that's significant because when he fought Goliath, he turned down the sword from Saul, and he relied on God and his slingshot to take down Goliath. But when he goes there, I see it as almost when he goes to the city of Nob and gets his sword, I see it almost as he's saying, I'm not trusting you, God, because I need this man-made tool to protect myself. He also, when he leaves Nob, he goes and hides in the city of Gath, which was the hometown of Goliath. He decides that, rather than trust God to save me from Saul, I'm going to go hide out among the enemies of my people, because surely Saul won't follow me there. And they finally chase him out of town, and he's in the wilderness where people go to, are sent to die essentially, and then he finally turns to God, and in the difficulties that face him after that. One such difficulty would be his wives and children were captured, and anybody, I know if anything happened in my life, first thing I do would be run off and try to get her back. But he inquires from God first, and we see that in 1 Samuel chapter 30. Then David said to Abiathar the priest, the son of Ahimelech, bring me the ephod. Abiathar brought it to him, and David inquired of the Lord, shall I pursue this raiding party? Will I overtake them? Pursue them, he answered. You will certainly overtake them and succeed in the rescue. So I think something that's very important is that we rely on God to face our challenges. God can move mountains, and what we see as a mountain, God sees as a way to glorify himself. In Mark chapter 11, I tell you the truth, if anyone says to this mountain, go throw yourself into the sea, and does not doubt it in his heart, but believes what he says will happen, it will be done. We need to have the perspective that God will fight our battles for us, like David did when he faced Goliath. When he went to talk to Saul about Goliath, he said, the Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will deliver me from the hand of this Philistine. Saul said to David, go and the Lord be with you. And then when he's talking to Goliath, Goliath says to David, am I a dog that you come at me with sticks? And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. Come here, he said, and I'll give your flesh to the birds of the air and the beasts of the field. David said to the Philistine, you come against me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day the Lord will hand you over to me, and I'll strike you down and cut off your head. Today I will give the carcasses of the Philistine army to the birds of the air and the beasts of the earth, and the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel. All those gathered here will know that it is not by sword or spear that the Lord saves, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give all of you into our hands. And a challenge that I faced recently, Coach Chamberlain kind of touched on it, was moving. I played safety for the first 3 years at UD, and then before this past year, they asked me to switch to receiver, and that was a real challenge. So I haven't played offense since high school, and I had to learn everything, and it was going into my last year, and it could have been very easy to just say, look, this is impossible. I'd rather just stay on defense, but I just trusted God, and that He would. This was what He wanted me to do with this plan, and it ended up working out, and I had enjoyed it, had a lot of fun. So I'm grateful for that, but it all started. If I hadn't relied on God, it would have been very easily to be discouraged in that situation. And the third point is we can be victorious by not following the crowd. In 1 Samuel chapter 17, we see that when David's going out to meet his brothers at the battlefield, bring them supplies, he notices Goliath, and says in verse 22, David left his things with the keeper of supplies and ran to the battle lines and greeted his brothers. As he was talking with them, Goliath, the Philistine champion from Gath, stepped out of his lines and shouted his usual defiance, and David heard it. When the Israelites saw the man, they all ran from him in great fear. Now the Israelites had been saying, "Do you see how this man keeps coming out? He comes out to defy Israel. The king will give great wealth to the man who kills him. He will also give him his daughter in marriage, and will exempt his father's family from taxes in Israel." David asked the men standing near him, "What will be done for the man who kills this Philistine and removes this disgrace from Israel? Who is this uncircumcised Philistine, that he should defy the armies of the living God?" They repeated to him what they had been saying, and told him, "This is what will be done for the man who kills him." When Eliab, David's oldest brother, heard him speaking with the men, he burned with anger at him and asked, "Why have you come down here, and with whom did you leave those few sheep in the desert? I know how conceited you are and how wicked your heart is. You came down only to watch the battle. Now what have I done?" said David. "I can't even speak." He then turned away to someone else and brought up the same matter, and the man answered him as before. See, if David had followed the crowd, he would have ran away with the rest of the Israelites. And people who are slaves to fear kind of despise those who stand up to their fear. The Israelites saw, this ginormous man in front of them, and they forgot that God was fighting their battles for them. And even in the face of Goliath defying their God, they still weren't concerned with it. They were more concerned with their own safety. No one was willing to stand up for their country or for their beliefs. A common way that they fought in those days were, the two armies would line up and they'd each send out one man, and the winner between those two, whichever man killed the other, then that army would take captive the rest of the other army. So nobody would step up to the plate, not only for their country, but no one would step up to the plate for God. But David, even though, I know if I had an older brother, but I know if my younger brother, if I kind of scolded him for something, he'd probably listen to me. But David realizes, that there's bigger things here. Like this man is defying my God, and I just challenge everyone to, be the same way. If you see something that you necessarily, that's in defiance to God, that you stand up and you stand up for what you believe in. And so the story that is kind of mixed feelings with me, but when I was in high school, the last game I played was the regional finals, and we were getting destroyed at halftime. It was 28-7, and they'd run for like 250 yards in the first half, and our coaches they came into the locker room, and everyone, the air was, it was kind of a little tense, but the coaches came in and just were like, you guys have had a great season, and I'm very proud of everything you guys have accomplished, and, just go out and, enjoy the second half, and, just, play your best, that's fine. And you could tell that, the atmosphere is kind of like, it was just dead after that, and they left, and, it'd been very easy to just be like, this is my last game, and this team is really good, but, that's how it's going to end. I know I'm going on to play more, but, I stood up, and I got in front of everybody, and I said, we're not going to lose this game. We're going to win. It's not even a question. And, we just need to, rally together and do it. And we came out the second half, and they scored a touchdown right away. We're down 35-7. But the atmosphere kind of changed on the sideline, and it wasn't dead anymore. And we came back. We came back and took the lead, 36-35, with it was 16 seconds left, and they went down and kicked the field goal, 49-yard field goal.